I'm coming to you from the future. I've already completed this job, and I want to tell you a couple things. One, you're going to want to make sure you have the gear oil, 75W90, and you want it to meet the GL5 specifications. You're going to want to pump that fluid into the differential once you get it changed. Now, if you buy a used differential, I highly suggest changing the module, taking the old module off of your existing one if you're replacing this due to the clutch packs. So you're going to take the old module off and put it on the new to you differential. Those are probably the most important things you're going to need. That being said, I found it easiest to pull both knuckles loose. I left one bolt on the lower control arm, and the reason I did that is because I believe that the bolt that holds that to the subframe is what holds the alignment, at least the camber. So I just wanted to bring that to you at the beginning of this video. I will have links in the description below for the gear oil and the pump, and if there's anything else I think that you might need. But 21 millimeter is going to be your friend, 18 millimeter, 15 millimeter, 14 millimeter, and 13 millimeter. So maybe make sure you have all your tools together, and a couple pry bars, one to make sure that you can pop that axle out of the differential, and then also I used it to kind of leverage the knuckle to get the axle up and out of the way. If you have popping or grinding at low speeds while turning in an Equinox or GMC terrain, you might want to watch this video. Initially, I was looking into this issue, and it was a clutch pack issue, which is pretty typical on a four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive vehicle and in the limited slip rear end. So I started looking into that, but the cost of that was astronomically higher than just finding a used rear differential off eBay. So that's what I did. I'll show you a way to confirm whether or not that's the issue that you have. The first thing we're going to do is get this cover off the fuse box. And I believe it is fuse 48, which is going to be right here. And this in the fuse box says RDM, and that's the rear drive module. After I removed this fuse, I no longer had the shuddering or popping and grinding while turning at low speeds. So that's how I deduced that our issue was within the rear differential. So I bought one off eBay, and I think it was around $250 with shipping. That's what we're doing today. We're going to be switching the rear differential out. So making this video is a little bittersweet. This vehicle has been with this channel in its entirety. So if you have an Equinox 2000, I believe it's 2010 through 2017, you might want to check out the playlist. I have everything from lowering it to timing chain, spark plugs, oil changes, wheel bearings, all the things that you might want to do to your Equinox. So I'm gonna get this jacked up, and we'll get under it and take a look and see what we have and what the process is going to be to get the old one out and the new one in. All right, we've got it up on jack stands, and now we're going to take a preliminary look underneath. I'll tell you kind of what my plan is, and we'll see how that pans out. This is the unit we're going to be removing. We will have to get the axles disengaged from it, but you can see that we have an exhaust pipe that's kind of in the way. We have a hanger here. Have a hanger here, and then we have one over here, and then one just a little bit past here, and then 3 bolts up here. So if we don't remove this exhaust pipe, we're going to be fighting the little ear right here. And so I'm thinking about just removing the exhaust it is just one piece all the way from up there all the way to back here. And I'm also thinking about only removing one knuckle from one side. I'm thinking the first thing I want to do is get the exhaust out of the way, and there's probably enough room that I can get this down and just push it forward, and then that'll be out of the way. Then we can turn our attention to getting these wheels off and getting access to the axles. And I think we only need to pull one axle, because as this comes down, we can move it over to the side and get the other axle out. So that should be fairly straightforward. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to knock the exhaust off these hangers. I'm going to pull those 3 bolts up there and try to remove the exhaust, and then I'll come back. All right, so a little bit of a news update. Those bolts up at the front, there's only 2 bolts up there. They are 15 millimeter. They did not want to cooperate. So what I've decided to do is follow the direction of some other people on YouTube that have done this job, and just took the exhaust hangers loose. You can see I've got this one loose, this one loose. This one will be next, but I'm going to wait until I am closer to ready to drop the rear differential. And you can see I've got the wheel off, but what I'm going to do now is go ahead and take a 15 millimeter and loosen the drive shaft from the rear differential. And that will be these bolts right here. This update is just showing that I've got the drive shaft removed from the rear differential. These are 4 15 millimeter bolts. If it's in park, you can get to 2 of them at the same time, put it in neutral, rotate this to where you can get to 2 more bolt heads, remove those. So now what I'm going to do is remove this fill hole plug and this drain plug. So I'm removing this first, and this should be a 10 millimeter or 3/8. I have a 3/8, hopefully that fits, and this will be the same size. But the reason I'm taking out this one before I take this one out is just so it will freely flow, and we'll get those removed and get the gear oil draining, and then I'll move on to removing the axle from the driver's side. I have broke these loose, and the internet did lie to me, and they said these were 10 millimeter hex, when in fact they are a T55 Torx. So what I'm going to do now, removing the oil fill plug, the gear oil fill plug, and then I'm going to remove the drain plug. And this one, we're going to take a close look at it. Obviously we're having issues with this. There's a magnet on the other side of this, and I'm guessing there's a lot of metal shavings attached to it. Alright, so I'm going to let this drain for a little bit. We'll take a look at the drain plug and see if it was very bad. Yeah, but there's not a lot of fluid in here. I think it calls for like 16.2 ounces, which is roughly a pint. And I did buy a quart. I'll have a link to that in the description below. But we'll come back here in a minute, getting the axle ready to pull. Alright, so while that gear oil is draining, I figured we'd come out here and get this axle loose to begin with. I will have put a list at the beginning of the video of what tools you need, because not everybody's going to have a 35 millimeter axle nut socket ready to go. So luckily I did have one and I didn't have to go get one. I'm going to remove this axle nut. I did already put some Croil on the nut. So I'm going to just spin this back on in case I need to tap it with a hammer to get it to free up. So at this point, I am not really sure what the exact best method is. I do believe I need to remove the caliper. I do believe I need to remove this top bolt here and the bolts that hold this trolling arm to the knuckle, and then we can rotate it forward. I did have this aligned, and based on what I'm seeing on this upper nut, there's no adjustment here. On this lower one, I did give them some cam bolts that I believe go through here. There's two of them, one on either side. So I think if we pull this bolt, we'll know once we get it out if it's a cammed bolt. And then pull these 3 bolts out. This is going to fold forward. We'll be able to get the axle through, and we can remove it totally out of here. And then the other side we won't have to remove because we'll get that rear differential to slide over as it's coming out, and as we put the new one in, we'll just push the axle in. That we will make sure we record. So for now, I'm going to remove the caliper. I'm going to get it set out of the way. This is already loose. I will remove this bolt and the bolts holding the trailing arm to the knuckle. So these are the plugs that came out of the differential, and they're really not as bad as I thought. I think this is the fill plug, and this is the drain plug, which is where we would find the majority of our junk, but honestly, it's not as bad as I assumed. And I do think that I've already changed the fluid in this once before, so that might be why I'm not seeing as much here as I thought I would. Also, I'm about to put these back in because the axle's out. So at this point, I need to pop the axle loose from the differential for the passenger side, and then we can actually start to drop this. I do have the exhaust completely lowered, and you can see the 2 bolts that I need to get that rear differential free. I do already have that 18mm loose, and I have that one loose. So actually at this point, I don't see a reason why we're going to have any issue with this side. So I'm just going to remove these 2 21mm bolts, and we'll be ready to drop this out, and we'll get the new one. You know, if a guy wanted to, he could change the sway bar bushings right now. But this guy doesn't want to. But yeah, we'll get these 2 removed, we'll get the old one out, and we'll take a look at the new one, or the new used one. saw there was probably the difference between pulling both of the axles instead of just trying to do it the easy way. That went in pretty straightforward. I'm going to put the 18mm bolts back in that hold it up. I'll just at least get them there so it'll hold. And then I'm going to put the 21mm bolts in from the back side. And then it's just putting everything back together. So got to find the nut for the other side. Once I get that bolted back up in place and put these 21s back in, here we are. We've got the hard part taken care of. I've got the I've got the differential in place. All the bolts are holding it where it needs to be. I need to reinsert the bolts for the drive shaft, and then I need to make a determination on the seals, the axle seals that go into the differential. That was not something that I was really thinking much about, so when I pulled the axles from the differential, the seals came with the axles, so I'm thinking about pulling them and checking them, make sure everything's good. In my opinion, the axle seals go on to the differential and then you put the axle through. I don't want to push them back on with the seals on the axle because I think that could potentially lead to a leak. So when we come back, I'll probably have the axle, I'll probably have it all back together, to be honest. It's quite a cumbersome task, and if you're going to do it by yourself, it would definitely be good to get higher than just these regular jack stands, because once I pulled these knuckles loose on both sides, they were kind of hanging. This side, the lower control arm is lower, and anyway, just getting under it is kind of rough. I told you earlier I've got some issues with my shoulders, so that also causes some issues. But yeah, if you're going to do this by yourself, definitely get a friend to help you. But we'll come back once everything's back together, and we'll make sure swapping this out did what I needed it to. I think where I left off was we have oil seals or shaft seals that go into that rear differential. It's a good idea to replace them when you're doing this job, but they are pretty expensive. I think I found them for like $75 a piece. So that'd be two, and that puts us up to $150 for those. And I think the rear diff was $250 on eBay shipped. So what I've decided to do is take them off and clean them, and I'm gonna make sure that they go on the same side that they came off of. So this one came off of here. I've cleaned it up. I used some Croil to clean it. I'll clean it up even better before I put it on. And then we want to put this in the rear diff before we put the axle back on. So I'm going to clean the other one. Here you can kind of see what it looks like. I just used a little pry bar and went back and forth trying to make this as smooth as possible, get that out. So I'm going to clean both of those up and then get them back in the rear differential. You see there I've got the seal back in. I did just clean the shaft right here. I want to make sure that there's no debris that's going to score that seal. So it's time to get this back in. Unfortunately, I don't have a good view of it, but I'm going to go ahead and get the axle back in. Well, here you can see we've got everything all back together. One thing I wanted to tell you is the speed sensor connector. When I tried plugging it back in, it didn't want to seat all the way. So this is something good to have in your toolbox or in your garage. I just sprayed a little bit of this on both of the pigtails and let it dry, and then it slid right in. So just thought I'd tell you that. Went ahead and changed brake pads while I was here. They were almost nothing. But yeah, the reassembly is just like the disassembly. So just follow the same steps, taking it apart. We'll do some testing, and hopefully this takes care of our problem. Well, here you can see I've got everything back together. I've also painted the brake calipers, but both axles are in, everything is reassembled. U-joints are back in. We're ready to fill the rear differential with gear oil. And these are probably the two of the most important things that we need. We've got the gear oil itself, and then we have this pump. Without this pump, it's quite a task. For the gear oil, it calls for 75W90, and I believe it is the GL5 rating that we need. So I'm going to get the oil fill plug out of the way, and we'll get this pumped in there, and I'll show you what we need to do to get that pumped in. Alright, so our fill hole is right here. I think you can see it. Right there. So what we need to do is get this tube from the pump in that hole. And what we're going to do is pump this until fluid comes back out. All it's going to do is fill this cavity from here up to the bottom of this hole. Once it starts to run out, then we are good to stop. Okay, there we go. Okay, now we can tighten the fill hole plug. I think earlier I said this is a T55, but I think that was just due to rust that I couldn't get the T10 or the 10 millimeter Torx or 10 millimeter hex. I believe this was 21 foot-pounds, very similar to what you would do for the oil drain plug. All right, I'm gonna get the wheels back on and we will do some testing. All right, so everything's back together. Tires, wheels are back on. We're back on the ground. I did turn the key on. I had checked something else under the hood. I did notice that the service all-wheel drive is still on after we replaced the fuse. So what I'm going to do is open the garage door, hop in, and as long as it's not raining out, I'm going to pull it forward, and then I'm going to run a scan with my scan tool. I'll put a link in the description below for the scan tool. It's been very helpful for me. Alright, so this left rear wheel speed sensor circuit, it's not a current one. This one, I had the hood open. And okay, so this is saying that that module is not programmed. So let's see if we can program that module. So hopefully this works. So the code we have is the C056E-47 electronic control unit software, been not programmed. So we do have an option here: clutch control module rear drive system matching identification setup. So here it's asking for the current value, and it's a 2-digit value. And then there's a new value. Click to input to change the value. So after doing some reading, you can get the current value from $75. So now I have to get the code off this plug on the one that I just put in. Okay, this is 84. So we will go in and see if we can get this to program. 75 and 84. $75, okay. Out of range. Input. Okay, let's do 84. Well, I should have just changed that entire module. I don't think I'd have this problem had I changed that entire module. Alright, I'm back. Didn't have any luck with programming, so I plugged in the other module, the original one, and I'm curious to see what comes up on the dash. Okay, well, looks like I need to switch the module. Alright, well that was fun. I'm going to pull this out and do another scan, and then I'll do some testing. But, so far the light's out. Happy with that. So here we're going to go back, automatic scan. The hood switch on this is been an issue for a while. If I leave it parked with it locked, the alarm will go off. Alright, so that code is gone. We got something on the rear wheel speed sensor, but it is showing up as history, so I think that is old. And I think it's from when I had it unhooked and I had turned the key on earlier. So that one should go away, and the hood, that's just gonna be on. So I'm gonna take it for a little test drive and see what we have. So where this would really show itself is like me turning out of this driveway. It buck and pop and crack and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so I'm just going to take it down the road and see how it acts. Alright, we did a nice little drive and we do not have any lights back on. So I'm calling this a win.